This presentation is meant to serve as a helpful recap of one of the subgroups of the core competencies of libraries, history of libraries and librarianship. While much of this information will be review, if we look at using the information from this PowerPoint as a teaching tool, we can see that this information can be very helpful and that the history of libraries and librarianship have really helped shape the way we view the profession today. This presentation can be seen as a fun way to teach library patrons about the history of libraries. Let us begin. Chapter 1, The Beginning. Once upon a time, there was a man named Alexander the Great, a great conqueror of land and a well-versed thinker and scholar. His vision was to create the biggest and best Greek collection of information and house it all under one roof. Unfortunately, Alexander the Great died before ever being able to see his vision come to reality, but his followers decided to continue his dream and build a library in his honor. His loyal friends set forth to obtain the greatest collection the world had ever seen. At its peak, the Great Library of Alexandria was estimated to have up to 700,000 works. And while there were other libraries before the Great Library of Alexandria, none were as grand or as housed as many works. However, its true grandeur is lost to us because, as we will learn through several stories, the paper and books plus the addition of flame make for an excellent bonfire, but a very poor library. The legend of the Great Library was not lost, however, and as time moved on and new inventions were made, thank you computers, it became easier to mass-produce copies of works and keep them in multiple places. As the idea of libraries grew, who could use them and where they should be housed did too. Chapter 2, The Start of Public Libraries. Prior to the Boston Public Library becoming reality, social libraries that mainly relied on volunteers and small fees, could be found throughout the newly formed country. Relying on patrons to volunteer their time and to pay a small fee proved difficult in times of financial crisis. Depressions hit these institutions hard, and many of them crumbled under the lack of support. According to scholar Michael Harris, social libraries also only relied on providing knowledgeable information and tended to steer away from popular fiction. So that meant no fantasy or romance or science fiction or any other great genres that are so popular today. Horace Mann, the Secretary of Boston Board of Education in Massachusetts, raised a great point as the 19th century continued. The who, what, where, when, and why began to be asked of what young minds were reading. He said, "After the rising generation have acquired habits of intelligent reading in our schools, what shall they read? For with no books to read, the power of reading will be useless, and with bad books to read, the consequences will be much worse than the ignorance as wisdom is better." What books, then, are there accessible to the great mass of children in the state, adapted to their moral and intellectual wants, and fitted to nourish their minds with the element of righteousness and wisdom? Thoughts like this helped launch school libraries and further help public libraries become reality. A library with funding and staff that would help propel the system we know today. As the 19th century roared on, those wanting to access knowledge began to understand the value that place was previously kept away from the majority of society. George Ticknor, mistakenly referenced in the Book of Foundations of Library and Informational Science as Charles Ticknor, and Edward Everett put forth the effort to create Boston's first public library. Set out with slightly different agendas for the library, together they were able to combine their visions and help lay the foundation for public libraries across America. Previously, libraries had been thought of as more of a personal, private collection reserved for those influential people like governors and doctors and religious figures. But what would be the purpose of the first public library? To inform? To maintain social constructs? To develop a highly flammable institution prone to losing valuable information? Probably not the latter, but both Everett and Ticknor believed that the general public education would benefit greatly from the addition of a public library, either in the views of it helping continuing their education or improving social and political stability. And when the first public libraries opened, little did they know that their impact would be felt for years to come. While libraries did prove to do good overall, there were some, Michael Harris, that believed there were other motives to those who urged for public libraries. His argument was that the public library was implemented not as a learning tool, but as a way to keep and maintain social order. Those who didn't have the education to read certainly wouldn't want to venture into a place that would require them to do so, and leisure time wouldn't enter the working class for many years to come. Libraries have gone on to service a great number of different classes and people. Public institutions strive to be able to reach as many people as they can, which would make Harris's argument seem illegitimate. While there may be some truth behind his argument, it is proven that libraries have overcome any social structure previously placed on them. If they hadn't, I doubt we would have libraries. We would see the continued success libraries have today. Some food for thought. How would libraries be different today had Harris's idea of maintaining social order held true? How would this narrative be different? Chapter 3. Our ILF, Important Library Figures. These familiar faces have played a critical role in the development of libraries and librarians. Our first ILF is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was a renowned bookworm and held one of the largest personal copies of books. A library fire in the Library of Congress during the War of 1812 was the main reason Jefferson decided to depart with his vast collection. With hopes of restoring the library, Jefferson was offered nearly $25,000 for his collection. And while the decision was not an easy one for Congress, they did eventually accept. Unfortunately, for 2/3 of Jefferson's collection, another fire would destroy 55,000 volumes on Christmas Eve in 1851. ILF number 2, Andrew Carnegie. After the sale of his self-made steel fortune, Andrew Carnegie left the business and donated large sums of money to help bring forth a multitude of libraries. Some figures projected over 2,500 libraries were started with his funds from 1883 to 1929. Libraries today still bear his name and are a huge part of the conversation. ILF number 3, Melville Dewey. Melville Dewey was the founder of the Dewey Decimal System, a neat little system that helped give every book in a library an address. Are you a cookbook? Try 641. A biography? 921. What about a collection of fairy tales? Well, you'll find a place at 398.2. And while there are other systems like the Library of Congress cataloging or the more recent Dewey List libraries, the Dewey Decimal System is arguably the most common system and the most recognized. Melville Dewey was also the founder of the Library Journal, which is a journal still helping libraries and librarians today. He also founded the School of Library Economy, the first library school responsible for studying the training of all future librarians. ILF number 4, Laura Bush. The former First Lady was a huge advocate for literacy. Prior to her time at the White House, Laura was a certified librarian, having obtained her MLIS degree from the University of Texas, Austin. Her foundation, Laura Bush Foundation for American Libraries, helps libraries every year obtain extra funding to keep their programs going. ILF number 5, Carla Hayden, the first woman and first African American to become the Library of Congress librarian. Her nomination came in 2016 from then President Barack Obama. After working in multiple different library positions, Carla worked her way to the top. She is a great example of how many different fields one can occupy with a library science degree. Honorable mention ILF, Nancy Pearl. She is a spokesperson and celebrity for the library community. She started the internationally recognized program, If All Seattle Reads the Same Book, which has been translated to a number of different cities. The librarian action figure was modeled after her. Chapter 4, The Modern Day Librarian. While we can't all be superheroes like Nancy Pearl, or the inventors of the computer, or members of the Boston elite, or millionaires who could help establish thousands of libraries, those who choose librarianship still have a critical role in keeping up with the ever-changing system. To help build on the foundation, librarians have to be many different things. This brings us to a really important question. What do we consider to be the most important element of librarianship? And are there things viewed as improvements like technology or organizational systems or education that could actually harm the profession in the long run? If we look at libraries of today and the knowledge from the past, we can see how versatile libraries must be in order to keep up with the demands of society. The history of libraries and librarianship prove that change can be good.